Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shaman. And joining me are my good friends. Hello, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter, Long Island. And hello also, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed in New York City. It's great to see you. I hope you had a wonderful Shavuos. We were just talking about what we taught. Rabbi Kalmanowski, you taught about Shimon Bar Yochai.
Shimon ben Yochai is a great story. It's one of the foundational stories. The Talmudic story becomes a source for the traditions of Jewish mysticism about the wonder of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who lives for 13 years and then has to return for one more year in a cave to escape the Roman persecution. And he's just constant rapturous Torah study in the cave. It brings the mysteries of life to him.
Amazing.
He's kind of refined into a really superhuman kind of person.
I taught the Pasuk Torah Adonai Timimam Shivat Nafesh. The Torah is complete. It restores the soul. And I thought about all three of us, how this chance of Torah study really is restorative to us. We have some simchas going on in our families. We got 3 graduations. Big shout outs to Eliza. Eliza Chesler is graduating law school. We got Shai Kalmanowski, SUNY Buffalo.
Yep.
Mayan Melamed, graduating from Muhlenberg College in Allentown. So mazel tov to all of our graduates.
Wait, no.
And more.
Odelia's graduating. Odelia Kalmanowski is graduating Heschel High School.
Hey, mazel tov, mazel tov.
Yeah.
Mazel tov to our graduates. Mazel tov to anybody who's watching, who has a graduate in their family. Mazel tov. Naturally, of course, we've been watching, the events in Israel. We are hopeful that the events of the last 24 hours, we're recording on Thursday, the ceasefire will hold. We pray for Sheket. We pray for calm. We pray that all the deep wounds that have been inflicted within Israeli society find their healing. And one way to find healing and to restore the soul is Torah, this Parashat Naso. What a great Parsha, an amazing Parsha, Parashat Naso. Is this the longest Parsha in the Torah? This is the longest Parsha in the Torah. Uncoupled, it's just a big Parsha. Because
in the triennial cycle, my shul we've always been an annual cycle, and in the Zoom era, we've shrunk to a triennial. And I must say to my listeners, I hope from the shul, I hope you will be excited to return to an annual. But I think some people are telling me that they like a shorter Torah reading. That does not make me happy. But this year in triennial 2, it is just the 4th Aliyah. Okay, yeah. It is simply that big, long, gigantic 4th Aliyah, which is the Sotah, the Nazir, and the Birkat HaKohanim.
So we got to talk about all of that. In addition, we got to talk about the gifts of the tribal chieftains. But first, let's just talk about the items at the beginning. And I don't know, somehow this captivates my own imagination. The idea that each family of the Levites has a specific set of tasks. Just the Rosh Bnei Gershon, Zot Avodat Mishpechot HaGershoni. This is the job of the Gershonite clan. Lavod ulamasa. They got to carry the stuff. The Nasuet Yeriot Mishkan. They carry what the garments, the coverings, and all the different toppings to the fabrics, all of the things. And I suppose what I want to talk about and what I would just get you to react to isn't it interesting to have families focused on specific activities, that their job, they have their job. I don't think our society is organized that way. It's families do represent a microcosm of a culture, and things are passed down to families, in families. Families do things certain way. Is this a theme that any of you can relate to in some way, or just have something to share about or offer on this?
I think about, first of all, as you make this observation, I think about last names. Okay, Malamet. I tell you, I know something about your ancestors. They were teachers.
They were teachers,
right? I don't know Chesla. I don't know. I think Chesla. I think it's probably from a place, and
Well,
Kavanagh.
actually, in one of the books I looked up, it referred to a woman from Czechoslovakia.
Okay. So, but like the people named Schneider, they were tailors and or Chayat in Hebrew, and the people named whatever Schechter or you know
Boucher in French. There's a butcher.
was a butcher. Okay.
And,
Like
and then we have all the English ones, Baker, Goldsmith.
yeah, and I think that like it's kind of a cliche to say that in our world we think that people should find jobs that they find meaningful and as right for them as individuals. And I think that probably at some level the ancient world, and it's true in this parasha, but there's other, there's whole families whose whole job was to bring the wood for the temple, and other people were the incense people, and some people, they were there's these things about the people of Jericho had the secret of the date palm, and because the date palm actually needs like some fertilization of the male and female plants and stuff, and the Afar Simon makers. And I think that I'm going to take a wild guess, so it's really not more than a guess, that pre-modern people didn't think that they were picking a job that spoke to them or work that they as individuals found meaningful. They did their work and they found their place based on family assignments. And you have this too, like the Gershoni and the Merari, and everybody gets their own specific jobs. Maybe
I would know two things. First of all,
Yeah.
as long as you're talking about last names, the oldest surname is Katz,
coincident.
which was a person, and probably came from a time when the Kohen no longer had that role in the temple that he had while the temple stood. But I think that what we also might say about pre-modern people is that their sense of identity first came from the family and the larger community. And in our day, the sense of identity is individual. That's why we're looking for personal meaning. We don't want to, most of us do not want to do what our fathers or our mothers did or our grandparents. We want to do something else. And we live in a society where that's possible. Our ancestors really did not live in a society where that was possible. The other thing to note here is that what we're talking about, at least in the description, is a community that's on the move. So everyone does need a role in order for the community to be able to move effectively. Because if everyone was left to their own devices, you can imagine, the numbers that the Torah speaks of, 600,000 fighting men, it would be chaotic.
So you're reminding me of camping days. When I was a Rosh Hashanah at Ramah in Canada, we
The
had
other Camp Ramah for our listeners.
So we had a big project called Linat Shabbat. We would take the whole Eda out of camp for Shabbat, and we had to do exactly that. We had to put different bunks or different groups of kids in charge of carrying the tents, pitching the tents, setting up the kitchen, setting up the cooking the food, and so each group really was tasked with a certain thing. Of course, they didn't pass that down to the next generation. They must in any kind of tradition, but I think you're right. Any organized society has to assign different roles, especially when it's very complicated to feed, take care, and maintain that whole camp. Yeah. So that's what's going on at the beginning. We have the Gershonites, the Merarites, the Kohatites, and they get numbered, and we are told what they are to do. And then the Torah really goes into a whole discussion. Well, it talks about we're going to leave out the casting out the Tzarua and the Zav and Tamei Lanefesh, but we want to talk about a couple of things that are in here. First, we have this interesting figure of the Sotah. We've talked about her before. And then we have the Nazir, the Nazirite, the person that takes upon the vows. I guess with your permission as the moderator here, why don't we focus on the Nazir for a second, okay? And talk about hair. The Nazir had to be defined by hair. And Barry, you mentioned before we were talking, we have two important Nazarites in the canon, in the Tanakh. Name 2 important Nazirim.
So the one is Shimshon, Samson, who figures in the Haftarah for this week. And the other one is Shmuel, Samuel, who is all sorts of things, a prophet, a priest in some sense, but also a Nazir. And, they present themselves, or they are presented as very different kinds of people. We attach to Shmuel a sense of piety that never quite embodied Samson. Samson is kind of a cartoonish figure, and the great comment about Samson, which is not in the Haftarah, is that he ended up killing more people in his death than he did in his life. That even his great contribution to warfare on behalf of the Israelites was achieved at the end of his life, not so much while he was supposedly acting the hero.
So can you just remind our viewers and listeners what he did? What did he do at the end of his life?
So his strength was in his Nazariteness, I guess we would say. And as long as his hair was uncut, he was the strongest person on the planet. But he reveals his secret to Delilah, and the Philistines cut his hair, and then he's rendered helpless. And they poke out his eyes, and they put him in the temple. And while they are all celebrating, Samson prays to God and asks for God to restore his strength so that he can push out the pillars so that the building collapses on all the Philistines gathered to celebrate.
It's a remarkable picture. It's so vivid in artistic depictions of the Bible, that the moment of the hairy Samson is standing between the pillars, and you see the force, that might, and that here we have the biblical era presenting this model of this hero and strength. I suppose it comes with all sorts of other qualities, masculinity, I suppose, the hairy man. Here we are, three guys with beards, there's something there, I suppose. But the Nazir in the Torah, though, is a different kind of personality. The Nazir in the Torah is someone who wants to be dedicated. And what do you think that the Torah is talking to here in terms of the human personality? Jeremy, have you encountered anybody like that who is so, committed or so, focused on wanting to be pious?
I one time when I was much younger said, "Oh, I'll take a Nazarite vow. This will be fun, and it'll be like an intense, sort of period of Nazarism." I had known that there was the famous Nazir Yerushalmi, Rav David HaKohen, who was the student of the Rav Kook, was a Nazir for his whole life. From a certain point, when he first landed in Eretz Yisrael, he became a Nazarite, was a Nazir until his death in 1968. And so this is really interesting. I'll do this, and then so I learned the tractate of Nazir in the Mishnah to discover that you can't end your Nazarite vow without a korban, without the sacrifice. So I thought you could do it for 30 days, and that's the basic time of the Nazarite vow in rabbinic literature. But it's got to end off with the korban. So if you take the Nazarite vow nowadays, it is a lifetime vow. So I was saved from that mistake. But I think that it is really, first of all, I think the intensity, arguably, listen, I am a conservative Jew. This is who I am. We're moderate folk. We're not extreme, and a little bit of extremism brings a little juice and passion. And so the Nazarite strikes me as bringing some real passion to religious worship, in a way that I find really, tense and kind of exciting. Of course, it's all bound up with a little bit of asceticism too. Like you renounce there's a famous piece of rabbinic literature in which Rabban Gamliel kind of castigates the Nazir because he had such beautiful hair, at the conclusion of which he's going to have to shave it all off and burn it as part of the ritual. and renouncing any pleasures of wine, are taken to be a kind of ascetic self-punishment in a way that may be, it's complicated. I don't know that those things are bad, because a short-term period of monkish asceticism seems to me like a healthy thing, and brings a little bit of electricity and intensity to your worship. It's interesting to me, by the way, that the Nazarite, it's ish o isha. So this is the Torah begins with the assumption that this is something that any number of people, males and females alike, would be interested in doing.
So it's fascinating that the Torah anticipates a proclivity in human behavior, that it is possible to have this sense of extreme, the possibility of being there, and it wants to channel that in a certain direction. Barry, you have any comments on the Nazir?
So in the world where we have two kinds of people, we have people who are content to do what is required and people who need to do more than is required. And the Nazir is clearly in the camp of the one who wants to do more than is required. And the Torah is not comfortable with it. I agree with Jeremy that there is a place for it, and the Torah in chapter 6 seems to indicate that it is a place. There is a place for it, but it is also dangerous. It's dangerous for the individual, and it's dangerous for the community as well, because, thinking about it and listening to you talk, it's not just asceticism. There's an element of zealousness in it. And that can be dangerous for a community. You can't really have a community of zealots. If we think back in Jewish history to the group known as the Zealots, they did not bring a lot of good to the Jewish people, even though they were quite pious.
But this may be one of the reasons why the time-limited Nazarite is or could be a healthy thing.
Right. Well, I thought you explained it very well, that, for a little while it's good. But I wonder, though, if one of the things the Torah is getting at is it's hard to stop. Even in a world where there is a korban, because there is an appeal to it.
I wanted to make the observation, by the way, you said, that this is a Torah, the thing the Torah appears to be somewhat uncomfortable with. And I think that this is a very, astute observation to any number of mitzvot, and it applies to two in this parasha, any number of mitzvot in which the commandment seems to be a matter of reform as opposed to straight up legislation. And so in other words, it may be not saying, it's possible that the Torah is not saying, I think what the Sotah is clearly not saying, oh, this is good, this is how you should behave. It sometimes comes along and says, all right, people are behaving in this way, let's reform how they're doing it and direct this into a more productive fashion. Because with the Nazarite, I think one of the most problematic things about the Nazarite, who becomes Ke'ilu the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol cannot be in contact with any death. His mother and his father die. The Kohen Gadol does not come in contact with those bodies. A regular Kohen is no contact with dead bodies except the immediate family. The Kohen Gadol, not even. So the Nazarite becomes like that, who just has no contact with death, except for the abandoned corpse. That's another matter. And that is like insane. That is insane in the best sense of the term. Like, he's in this period of religious intensity, or she's in this period of religious intensity, and the cost of it could be alienation from some of the most important relationships in your life. We don't want that to be an experience that you have for life. We can have some dealing with it if it's a 30-day period. That's a good thing. That might not be a bad thing. But we'd like to reform that. And I would say, by the way, the Sotah, the ritual by which the person who is, avar alav ruach kina, seized with this jealousy, there may be a way in which the Sotah ritual prevents that person from just chas v'chalila killing the spouse or getting all violent or whatever. Okay, there's a ritual. It's going to channel this negative energy in a way that might create the possibility of reconciliation.
So I think that's the key. I mean, one of the keys, at least, that's taking that energy, as you've been saying, taking that passion and channeling it. it's interesting as you speak. I'm thinking about the custom in more Orthodox societies of where young people, already in their 20, maybe even younger, are really encouraged to marry, and of course that certainly channels that energy into that the tendency of kids to be wild uh, is at that age between in late adolescence and really early adulthood, and what the tradition may be doing in its folk tradition is saying, look, yeah, you're going to have all this tendency to be wild, but here we're going to channel that to your spouse, channel that to your family, take all that energy and make yourself into something that becomes an instrument for the entire people. I think that's part of it. There is a civilizing nature to all religion, and the civilizing nature to Judaism is taking that wildness. And Shimshon is the ultimate wild man. I mean, he really is. He's wild in his looks. He's wild in his strength. He's wild in his sexuality, and he dies a violent, terrible, wild death. Shmuel less so. Shmuel is not your wild man, but we'll have to talk about him another time. Okay.
Samson is just an amazing thing, because there's like I don't forget, it's 3 or 4, but there's extended narrative about Shimshon in the Book of Judges. Like multiple times greater quantity of story about Samson than I think almost any other character in the historical books, maybe probably except for David himself. But there's a lot of material about him. And exactly as you said, this is the character who like kills a lion with his bare hands and has and kills all the people with the jawbone of the donkey and sleeps with lots of women. Like who, if you were making the film, like who would you cast?
Okay, from that we'll go to another favorite passage in this parsha, and that is Birkat Kohanim. Birkat Kohanim is nestled in this parsha. We could talk about why, but let's talk about the content of it. First of all, let me read the preamble. God says to Moses, Daber el Aharon el banav lemor. Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Ko tivarchu et bnei Yisrael. Thus shall you bless the people. Even that verse is very moving, because it means that there is a cadre of people within the Jewish people that is entrusted with blessing, that they have, their role is to provide blessing. That is to say, to stand and literally, in one interpretation, place the name of God on the people. But here, Jeremy, you are one of that clan. You are a descendant of Aaron the Kohen. We test you in the DNA. Do you feel that it's a special privilege?
Definitely do. And this is one of those things that ritual, that rationally, there are things that there are, kushiyot, like real hard questions that I can't necessarily answer. We talked about some families get to carry the wood of the Mishkan, and some families get to carry the curtains of the Mishkan, and some people get to be the priests. And there's no question that there's a kind of a caste quality to the role of Aaron's people. Would I think that by virtue of hereditary caste, I have some sort of like inherent power of blessing? Of course that it does not make sense. And when you get up there and like in many American synagogues, usually in the more Orthodox version, they say Birkat Kohanim on the Shalosh Regalim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. In Israel, they tend to do it, every day in every service. When you get up there and you say this blessing, which is really, I just find the blessing super moving. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'kiddushato shel Aharon, who sanctified us with a little bit of the sanctity of Aaron, v'tzivanu levarech et amo Yisrael b'ahava, and commanded us to bless the people with love. And there's a practice. You got your hands kind of balled into a little fist, v'tzivanu, and you Levarech et amo Yisrael. You open your hands to bless the people. And at that moment, that kind of opening hand gesture, you just have this, I feel, and have felt, a channel of beneficence and love that is, it's, I'm working myself up into these feelings, but they are real feelings, and it's great.
It's beautiful, and look, I've never been looking at the hands of the kohanim when they do that. I know that they're facing the ark, and then they turn around when they say those words. That
At Vitzi, you turn around at Vitzivanu and you open your hands at Livarech.
So being able to bless the people with love, and I'm recalling a quote: "Hashari b'lo simcha, hashari b'lo bracha." If you don't have personal joy, you can't offer blessings. So in a way, the obligation for kohanim, as the people entrusted with the power, by the power vested in the kohanim, you have an obligation to be happy.
Yeah, that's good. And to love. I mean,
for our sake, no morosity, no crushing morosity there, no depression. Some of us really enjoy.
For you though, for you, Elliot, this one is for you, because there's a now I don't remember where this is, but it does exist. The Hayeh Bracha, you be a blessing. And God says to Abraham in Lech Lecha, Genesis 12, Lech Lecha me'artzecha, etc., V'hayeh bracha, be a blessing. It says, until now, I, God, have held the power of blessing. Now I'm giving it to you. I'm giving you the capacity and the obligation to be a channel for blessing. And so Birkat HaKohanim, now again, I'm kind of mushing in my mind exactly, is this a single source? Is this multiple sources that I've mushed together? But like when I do Birkat HaKohanim, I feel that Hayeh Bracha part, that the power of blessing has been assigned to me and to us to be blessings and conduits of all the world's goodness and love and care ourselves.
So as long as we're making midrash on the fly here, when you say Vayeh Bracha, there's an intimation of the four-letter name of God, Yud Hey Vav Hey. And, each of the three clauses of the priestly blessing has the four-letter name of God. And the way that the rabbis understand it is that that name was actually pronounced when the blessing was given. And, I think it's important to recognize that the Kohen is a medium for the blessing. He's not giving the blessing. He's transferring it from God to the people in God's name. And what's, I think, of crucial importance for us in the modern world is we often ask where God is. God is with people. And in this particular place, he's with the kohanim, and the kohanim are placing God upon the community. And that could be a very powerful thing for the community, not just for the kohen as well.
You want to say, a lot of times people say, well, is God doing it or is people doing it? And the answer invariably is yes, right? So in the way that you said it, the beginning clause of the bracha, God says to Moses, say to Aaron, Ko tivarchu et bnei Yisrael, and amor lahem, this is how you should bless. And at the end, it's V'samu et shmi al bnei Yisrael v'ani avarchem, you place my name on the people and I will bless them. And so the answer is it God or is it the kohanim? And the answer is, of course, yes. The kohanim have to say the blessing, but that is what invokes the divine, who then can come and deliver the blessing.
The elements of the blessings are just so important. V'yichuneka, v'shmerecha, bless you and keep you. That is to say, have your entire well-being taken care of. V'yichuneka, be gracious to you, the kindness of God. And then, of course, shalom, the ultimate blessing, peace. And so, I wonder if the construction of this blessing is such that it's designed to include everything by just listing these basic elements. If you have your basic life taken care of, if you have a little kindness and you have peace, you don't need a lot more than that. Maybe a table, maybe a bed, maybe a chair. My late uncle used to say, you need a good set of tires, a good pair of shoes, and a good mattress. That's it.
Which uncle was that?
Uncle Dave.
It's not, he wasn't married to Roz.
No.
That was a different uncle?
Different uncle, Harry. Though.
Okay.
And no, yeah, it's a his Pirkei Avot was you need a good pair of shoes, a good set of tires, and a good mattress. If you got that, everything. That's it. Joy in the blessing, grace, kindness, peace. What more can you ask for? Maybe a few bucks. I don't know. All right. I want to go back. The Parsha ends with the gifts of the Nasi'im. The Nasi, I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. But last week, Barry, you said something. I kept it with me the whole week because we referred last week to the census and the fact that the passage of the census is very repetitive. You said something very interesting that in the song of the Torah, every tribe gets its own verse, and here I think the same thing applies. In the song of the Torah could have compressed all of this information into really a paragraph, but the Torah gives us one paragraph on each of the tribal chieftains and tells us the exact same offering and the exact same gift, and it's really part of the narrative, the story. It's the way that we stitch ourselves together, and I wonder if you could just amplify that idea again for us.
So there's a wonderful comment in Iturei Torah. So when we listen to the gifts given, the only thing that is different is the name of the Nasi. And if you listen carefully, that will stand out because it repeats itself, obviously. And some people may say it drones on, and then all of a sudden we get a name and a number, the number of the day. And the comment in Iturei Torah was that the way it's written is to emphasize the giver of the gift, because what we often lose sight of, most of us like gifts, of course, but what's really important is the giver and how the giver gives it. And you could give the same thing as another person, but it could be a unique gift because it's from you and not from the other person.
Absolutely. Jeremy, have any closing comments on that? No,
that was too good. That was too good.
I think each no, everybody has their own set of gifts. Everybody has their way of taking an attribute. You connect the beginning of the Parsha to now. I mean, it's like, yeah, these clans, they had individual attributes, but each one had their own style, their own individuality to them, I suppose.
Well, that's great. And that's great about Judaism. Prayer book's the same, mitzvot are the same, Torah is the same. Your individual relationship to it can be unique.
And that's a beautiful way to conclude our talk. We want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.
Mazel tov to all of our Simcha families, the graduates. We are with our brothers and sisters, our family and friends in Israel, and we're praying for Sheket, and we were praying for the priestly blessings. God keep us, God give us grace and kindness, and Hashem lanu kulanu. Shalom. Shabbat
Shalom. Amen.